Howdy SEO Moz fans, welcome to another edition of Whiteboard Friday. This week, Casey Henry from SEO Moz brought up an interesting SEO problem that's been troubling a lot of folks through Q&A and that I think a lot of SEOs have questions about. There are some best practices though that are going to help guide us through this. So, the first part, it's international SEO, but not just how do I target different countries, but really where do I host and how am I supposed to target these visitors and these searchers in these different countries in the most effective ways. So I'll present the basic problem, right? The premise of the problem is that essentially in a world where, in a perfect world, we would have one domain and we could have content of all different kinds, different languages, different countries on it, and the engines would easily recognize which content was targeted to which countries, and we might have separate filters to make sure that there's no duplicate content issues. They'd say, oh, well, this is the Canada content and it's in English. This is the United States content, that's in English. This is the UK content, the Australian content, the South African content, the New Zealand content. Great, and we can figure it all out. But unfortunately, the engines aren't quite this sophisticated yet. And so we have to play a little bit with the best practices and the rules around this. So walk through with me some of the options that we've got here. First, option A, right? You can go with a root domain ccTLD. So this would be, for example, let's say our friend Roger Mosbot is starting up a blog and he's got content in lots of different languages, right? Robots. I assume Roger Mosbot is like C-3PO or R2-D2 from Star Wars. He can speak any language that he likes, probably. So Roger Mosbot, right, he's got his DE site, and that's for Germany, and then he's got an FR one, that's for France, a CA one for his Canada stuff, .com.au for Australia. This is an option, right? He can build all these separate domains, own each of them, put different content on them according to the language and the preferences of the people there, target those currencies if he's got something to sell, make sure that they are regional friendly, that the hosting is in each of those countries so it comes up the fastest and so the engines know that that's where he's based. That could work. The frustrating part around this is that, oh, there's going to be a bunch of links that come to this one, right, that come to the DE one, but those links won't necessarily boost the domain authority or importance of the .fr one. And likewise, the .fr one won't boost those of the .ca or the .de or the .com.au. So it can get a little frustrating and you're sort of thinking to yourself, boy, it'd be really nice if all these links could count towards that one domain. And there's ways to do that with option B and with option C. So option B, of course, being subdomains. You can see Wikipedia doing this, right? They have en.wikipedia.org, de.wikipedia.org. So you use that subdomain to segment out the visitors and or to segment the language and country targeting. The problem with subdomains, at least as I see it, is that sometimes, not all of the time, but sometimes the subdomains don't inherit all the domain authority, trust, value that you might get from separate subdomains or from all the content being on a single root domain, right? So de.rogermosbot.com, maybe that'll be interpreted the same way www.rogermosbot.com or fr.rogermosbot or ca.rogermosbot, but it might not, right? And that can be a frustrating experience as well. Option C is probably the best way to do the domain authority collapse, and we'll talk through some of the weaknesses here too, but this is essentially saying, you know what, everything is going to be on rogermosbot.com/de, and you can see some sites, Microsoft owns a wide variety of sites that do precisely this, right? They've got like an en-US and an en-UK, right? Saying essentially, oh, that's our English language site targeting the UK, and they do it all in subfolders. So the Microsoft.com domain is getting all of the domain authority assigned to it, and hopefully that's passing through to these subfolders. In most cases, it's going to. The weaknesses around the subfolder and subdomain, even though they have the strength of potentially inheriting some of that root domain authority, is that, is really two things. Number one, there's, let's call it the France, or the French searcher problem, which is essentially that some research has been shown that people who are searching in France really like to see .fr in the websites. And in fact, they're going to be more likely to click on those results, more likely to buy from those. And this French bias in France applies to many other countries as well. I believe some research was showing that the Czech Republic has the same thing with .cz domains, that in fact in Canada for a long time, I'm not sure if it's entirely true now, but in Canada for a long time, they would click .ca domains, particularly around e-commerce types of websites, because many US sites wouldn't ship to Canada, and that could be frustrating. Same problem with the UK. So there's this inherent biasing from users saying, hey, I'm not sure that I'm going to click on this and I'm going to be able to get what I need. And then there's also the issue of the search engines having a very strong, especially Google, and particularly over the last few years, it seemed particularly strong that essentially a .de website doesn't need nearly the links or authority or ranking power or metrics that a de.rogermosbot or a rogermosbot.com/de needs. That having this top-level TLD, ccTLD, country code TLD, essentially gives you that extra boost in the search engines when you're targeting those international countries. And that's why, generally speaking, if you are a big brand, big site, and you've got a big budget, I would recommend getting these specific ccTLDs, building up those country presences around those language groups. And there's something sort of even more frustrating, which is that technically Google Webmaster Tools will allow you to go into Google Webmaster Tools. Whoops, just grabbed that. Oh, that didn't happen. Nobody saw that, right? All right, good. Right, you can go into Google Webmaster Tools and you can say, oh, de.rogermosbot.com, I want to target that specifically to Germany, right, or to Deutschland, to DE. And you can do the same thing with /DE. But weirdly, even though you can do this in Google Webmaster Tools, it seems to us, and obviously we're not perfect, we don't know everything about Google, but it seems to us and to a lot of other SEOs that this targeting inside Webmaster Tools doesn't give you the same benefits that hosting on the .de does, particularly if you're hosting the .de and you're hosted in that specific country, meaning the IP address, right, is coming from that country. That's another very important thing to be thinking about. So knowing this, there's strengths, there's weaknesses, how do I make a decision? It's a tough, tough call. But there's a few things that can help guide you through. So first off, think about the brand reach and the marketing potential. If you're a brand that's big enough or powerful enough, or you have enough of a marketing presence and a budget, or you think you will in the future have that presence and budget, I would go for option A, the root domain with the ccTLDs that are separate, the .de, the .fr, the .co.uk, those kinds of things. And the reason being essentially that if you can build links to those, build up their authority, they're just going to have a much higher propensity to rank well in the search engines, and they get through this problem of users being fickle about what they'd like to click on, or not fickle, but picky. Right? As well they should be, right? They've had bad experiences in the past with domains that aren't targeted to their country, so they don't want to click those anymore. So you really want to get these domains. The second thing to think about is languages. And this is a really tough one, particularly for English, but for a lot of languages that are spoken in multiple countries. So you have languages like French, right, which is spoken in parts of Polynesia, in parts of France, I believe in Senegal, in France itself, in Quebec, in Canada. So you've got this kind of diverse group of folks, and you go, well, which one should we have, a .ca and a .fr? But it's going to be basically the same language. How do we tell those people that they're getting the same thing? This can be a challenge, and what I generally recommend is if you think you've got a substantial population group in that specific country that speaks the language, in multiple countries, I'd build those two separate websites, assuming you're a larger brand. If you're not, if you're sort of a smaller brand and you're okay with reaching out, SEO Moz, for example, right, we're fairly international, we're on a .org, we own the .com as well. It's okay to basically say, oh, you know what, we're just going to be the .com, and that's going to serve all of US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, et cetera, right? All the places where English is a primary language. And this is a fine way to go if you're sort of a small to medium-sized brand, or if you're fairly sure that there's not a big need to be separately geo-targeted. Now that said, in the future it's possible that we might invest along these lines, and nothing prevents you from owning those sites and just redirecting them for now. I'd also be thinking really hard about user behavior and preferences, right? So if you know, for example, that you're targeting a country that's going to be very sensitive to an outside presence or to the particular type of domain that you're on. I don't know, you're, let's say, Fairyland and Ogreland, right? And those two lands just don't get along with each other very well. And so you're in Fairyland and you're thinking, oh, I'll make a Fairyland TLD and that'll target Ogreland, and the ogres are just thinking, no, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to use real countries because I don't know, maybe everybody gets along nowadays. Let's hope so, right? So user behavior and preferences is another thing that I think about. And then the last one that can be complex as well is geodetection and redirection. So here's what happens, right? Let's take a look over here. Oftentimes, if you've got a website that has, let's say, a home page, and you have many different home pages, many different sites targeted towards different countries, what you'll do is you'll say, oh, here comes a visitor, right? There's my visitor, and they're coming to my website, but oh, wait, I can see here that they are from, let's say they're from France, right? So, whoop, we're going to send them over here to the .fr version of the site. You'd think this would be great, but it can be very challenging. We just had a question in Q&A that I answered actually with someone who had been doing this and was finding that Google couldn't crawl any of their international sites. Why? Well, because their IP address is coming from the US. So the only site that they'd ever see is the US site. And when they clicked any link that would take them to France or any of these other places, they got instantly redirected. So you need to provide that either a splash page or a home page that defaults to one of the languages or another, or that defaults to a please choose your country code, or we think that you're in this place. Or even if you want to redirect them, use something like a JavaScript, right, where it won't catch the bots in that redirection loop and prevent them from indexing those separate places. What's nice is that you can use cookies to essentially say, once this person has been to this website and then selected that they want to go to France, from then on, I'm going to say, I recognize you. You were here last week. I'm going to send you to the French version of the site. And that works very well. Just be really careful that you're not doing this by default by IP address, because you'll hit the search engines and you'll redirect them to all the wrong places, or you'll prevent them from getting to all the right places. All right, so this is a complex issue. I'm looking forward to some discussion in the comments. Certainly can provide some links to other resources on this one. And I hope that next week you'll join us again for another edition of Whiteboard Friday. Take care.